The Lord be with you, my beloved. It is wonderful to be this evening with you to talk about the Anglican Network in Europe. Recently, a friend of mine came to visit me, and we had a lovely evening together. And during that evening, he asked me what were my thoughts about the Anglican Network in Europe. Once I shared my thoughts about it, he asked me if I thought that they had a future, or they would be like other movements who started very well, and over time they lose a little bit of their strength and growth from the beginning. I was, and I am, very optimistic about the future of the Anglican Network in Europe. Not only because during the month of October I had the privilege of being present in the installation of the first bishop of the third diocese for ANiE, but also because of what I saw, what I heard, and because the consecration of Bishop Gideon was an occasion of great joy, and I saw so much of their power and the strength and the blessings of God upon them. In this video, I would like to share some of my thoughts as someone who loves church planting and is as the servant general of a missionary order of church planters, about what I see in the Anglican Network in Europe and why I'm so optimistic about their future. And because I believe that it's very important at this moment in time that Europe recovers a heart for church planting and disciple making. And I have seen many optimistic circumstances in the Anglican Network in Europe who makes me very, very positive. Let us look a little bit about the history. What is the Anglican Network in Europe? Why does it exist? The reason is because in the midst of all what the Anglican world is facing, and not only Anglicanism but many other denominations, GAFCON, as a part of a movement to bring realignment in the Anglican family, did in 2013 call in Nairobi for the creation of what it was called the Anglican Mission in England. That is the first diocese of the Anglican Network in Europe. The Anglican Mission in England had a panel of bishops who were overseeing until 2017, when Bishop Andy will be consecrated in the United States. And he became the spiritual oversight, the bishops over the Anglican Mission in England. In 2020, a new diocese was established called the Anglican Convocation in Europe. The goal of the Anglican Convocation in Europe, the reason why it was established is because our Scottish brothers and called upon GAFCON for help. Together with the Scottish, there were the Wales and some of the congregations in Europe, but also other congregations in England who thought they couldn't join the Anglican Mission in England for one reason or another, and they thought a new diocese was needed. Therefore, the Anglican Convocation in Europe was established. And recently, 1 month ago, the third diocese was established, where to oversight all this work, who grow from only a couple of churches in 2013 to 89 congregations and church plants by 2024, there are six bishops serving them. They are the Bishop Andy Lyons, who oversight both the Anglican Convocation in Europe and also the Anglican Mission in England. Bishop Gideon is the other diocesan bishop. The Anglican Convocation in Europe has two assistant bishops, Ian Ferguson and Stuart Baird. Ian is from Scotland, Stuart is from Wales. I had a great time with them. I really enjoyed being with them. I thought they are really awesome. Two men with great experience in church ministry, with a heart for the people, a heart to invest in young men, and it was a joy to meet them. And then obviously I know Lick McNann for a long time before he was a bishop. His heart for church planting, his determination to see England to be rich with the gospel is amazing. And I had the joy to meet Tim Davis. And by the way, this is the second Tim Davis who is my friend. So in less than 5-6 years, I have 2 friends called Tim Davis. But I wonder if I would call someone, one of the team, thinking it's the other team, as I have both of them as Tim Davis. And then we have Bishop Gideon, who is an awesome man, a man who a few years ago, he started in Manchester with a church, and over a decade, he has now 39 churches in the Anglican missionary congregations in Europe, what is the 3rd diocese of the Anglican Network in Europe. Each one of those men brings different gifting and talents, but the same clarity, passion that they have shown over the years for church planting, disciple making, and loving people. One of the things I have been really impressed with each one of the bishops of the Anglican Network in Europe is how much they love God and how much they love God's people, and how much they are willing to see others to be rich, and to be rich for Christ and being discipled and be prepared and to be loved by them. They are standing men that are serving in the Anglican Network in Europe. That is one of the reasons why I believe that the future of the Anglican Network in Europe has a very strong roots that will be very difficult, the things will go to the wrong path. Together with that, I will want to mention, I have mentioned briefly, but I would like to look into more details, the fact that the Anglican Network in Europe probably is the fastest growing denomination in England or in the UK right now. I know this is very easy to say, and different people will be looking different things. I don't have all the statistics, therefore I could be wrong, and I know we could look the average Sunday attendance and the total church membership, and maybe other churches are growing faster. But to consider that in 2013, a new denomination started with a couple of congregations. The 11 years afterwards, they have 89 churches, plus I know that other churches are in process of affiliation, or they are planning to plant new churches next year, or even in this year. It makes me think that is one of the growing churches. I don't know any other church who has had so many churches start and planted in this period of time, mostly when you look percentually. In other words, if you start with 3 churches and now you have 89, it's not only 100% growth, it's a bigger growth than that. Therefore, this is something very encouraging. Very soon, the benchmark of 100 local churches will be overcome by the Anglican Network in Europe, and that will be a very important point from which they can ignite a stronger movement. The idea that they were not growing fast, they were only something temporarily, that the future was uncertain, all these questions will disappear once they overcome the figure of 100 local churches. And I think it will happen next year, and it will be very positive to see. The other thing it really has made me think about the Anglican Network in Europe has a great future is the few cases that their church plant has gone south. So that they started a church plant and it had to be closed because something happened. This is very common in church plants. The level of failure about church plant is very high. It's very difficult to start a church and to be alive in 10 years. Why? Because church life is very complex, and one of the most important families that the person doing the church plant lives, and that unsettles the whole congregation. It can be a spirit, it can be 100 different reasons. But the number of churches the Anglican Network in Europe has planted and have not succeeded is very, very small, and that is very encouraging. Mostly when we think that the Anglican Network in Europe doesn't have that many resources, many of their pastors are bivocational, and even so, the churches have grown and have become successful. The idea of a church need to have someone full-time has been proved wrongly by strategies implemented by the Anglican Network in Europe. And it's something that I have been saying for a long time. It's very difficult in the future 100% of the ministers will be able to work full-time in the church. Why? Because we don't have the resources. The churches in Europe are small, and to sustain a minister and the whole family, it requires a lot of resources that most churches don't have. And the Anglican Network in Europe has been able to plant new churches, to grow churches with ministers who have been bivocational. And as the denomination continue growing, they will have more resources, they will be able to train their own ministers, and therefore the Anglican Network in Europe will have a greater future than many people have doubted in the past. Therefore, as I have said, in only 11 years, the growth has been fantastic. The level of success has been very low. As they grow, they will have more resources, and the leadership is really amazing. They are godly men who has a pastoral care, a pastoral heart. They have a vision for church growth, a desire for disciple making. And the other thing very important is here we have a quite new denomination who has gone through important processes of adjustment, who has not caused divisions or those conflicts they may have faced have not stopped them. Let me explain what I mean. Where in 2013, the Anglican Mission in England was established as a missionary society. They didn't have a bishop. They had a panel of bishops who were retired watching over them. Then in 2017, Bishop Andy became the bishop on the Anglican Mission in England. A couple of years later, the Anglican Convocation in Europe comes along, and Bishop Andy has now two different dioceses with two different cultures. One is English and represent what I call conservative evangelical, and you have another one who is the Anglican Convocation in Europe, who includes Scottish and Wales and some of the English and European churches with a very different culture, and they have to work together to find a path forward. I'm sure that they had some interesting conversations. I'm sure that they had to work through some of the issues, and they were able to walk through all these issues and all these conversations to move forward into what God had ahead for them. Amen. And this is very, very important. And then 4 years later, in 2020, the Anglican Network in Europe is established, and in 2024 they received the third diocese, a diocese who has a very unique culture, not only because most of the clergy are Nigerian, not all, but most of them are Nigerians, not because it came from a diocese where most people are bivocational, but also because it's a diocese who started by one church who planted other churches. And that brings a very unique culture of church planting and a passion for discipleship, very different from the Anglican Mission in England and from the Anglican Convocation in Europe. Therefore, all these different elements and the fact that they have gone through each one of those steps and came out on the other side stronger, I'm sure that with many moments that they probably thought nothing was going to happen, or very difficult moments, my experience as a bishop for 21 years tells me that probably there were a lot of interesting conversations, but the grace of God and the presence of God lead them into the right place. And now there are 6 bishops who I believe they will bring a stronger future for the Anglican Network in Europe. However, for me, the two things that I'm looking forward to celebrate with them, and I hope they will be invited when it happens, and will be when they began the 4th diocese. I don't know where it will come forward. I don't know if it will be one of the dioceses will multiply into 2 dioceses, or a group of churches that we cannot see right now. They will come forward and say we want to become a diocese. But one thing is, the moment they have the fourth diocese, it's unstoppable. The Anglican Network in Europe will be unstoppable on the things that God has ahead of them. The second thing I'm really looking forward to celebrate is when the Anglican Network in Europe has more than 100 churches. I think that benchmark will change the perceptions of many people. I know, because I have heard so many comments criticizing the Anglican Network in Europe and GAFCON, or thinking, oh, they are not very serious because they're very small. But the reality is, more and more, as every year goes by, the strength and the determinations and the sacrifice of these men has been really worth it to watch. And it brings me a clear picture of the success of the Anglican Network in Europe for the future. In fact, the Anglican mission in England had the aim of having 25 churches by 2025, and already has accomplished. The next goal they have, if I remember correctly, is to have 250 churches by 2050, where I believe that will happen. I believe that they are taking the right steps for that to be the case. And this is one of the dioceses, the Anglican mission in England. Now, if they have 250 churches, for sure they will have to establish more dioceses. A diocese of 250 churches is very difficult to manage, and probably it brings too many difficulties to things to be successful. I would recommend you, after 30-35 churches, to multiply, because 30-35 churches are relatively manageable for a bishop. And anything bigger than that, it becomes more complex. Now, I know bishops who have 50 churches, 60 churches, and they have managed in ways that has been amazing to see. But I would say my encouragement is, if the Anglican mission in England has already been successful reaching their first objective to have 25 churches by 2025, and it's one of the dioceses of the Anglican Network in Europe, imagine what we are going to see in the future. Now, as a servant general of the new Anglican Missionary Society, we hope and we pray that we will be able to help and support and assist and equip and train and inspire churches who will come and join the Anglican Network in Europe, like any other faithful Anglicans in Europe, because we want to see new churches being planted, not only in Europe but around the world. Or we are working hard to make sure that anyone who wants our help will be there to help, and to make possible that we ourselves plant churches, or we assist church planters or churches to plant new churches, as we equip and train, as we walk alongside, as we mentor them, as we inspire a new generation of church planters and disciple makers. Therefore, this is a longer video that I expected to answer the question if I believe that the Anglican Network in Europe has a great future. And I do think it does. And I pray for them, and encourage all of you who are listening to me to keep in your prayers Bishop Andy Lyons and the Anglican Network in Europe and the 3 dioceses who form right now. And as we continue to preach the gospel, to make disciples, to equip leaders, and to plant churches, faithful churches who multiply into more faithful churches in this generation. God bless you, and thank you so much for listening what I have to say. I would love to hear what you think about this video, about what I have said. Please write your comments, and I will make sure that I will reply them, and if there are comments that I can reply. And God bless you, and have a wonderful week.